How We Use the Delaware Watershed is made possible through a generous grant from the William Penn Foundation and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to our WHYY special, Preserving Our Waters, How We Use the Delaware Watershed. I'm Mark Eichman along with Shirley Min. All of our sources of water in Delaware come from out of state. We'll take a look at how those out-of-staters treat Delaware's waters.
And how well those water sources are protected in the future depends on how well we teach the kids today. Come meet the next generation of water stewards.
Clean water is important for our health, but it also offers lots of recreational opportunities. We'll hit the river with the Newport Rowing Club. Those stories and more coming up over the next half hour here on WHYY TV.
Welcome to the River Walk along the Christina River in Wilmington. It's one of the many rivers, streams, and creeks that make up the geography in the first state.
And when you think about water, do you ever wonder how our water gets from its source to your faucet at home? It takes a lot of coordination both in and out of Delaware. This farm near Landenberg, Pennsylvania has been in operation for more than 200 years. It's been run by a member of the Hoops family since 1854. Today, Barclay Hoops raises dairy cows on the land.
I just love this land and farm, and so do my children. So hopefully it'll continue on. And it's preserved, so that's a good part of it.
And although it's miles from the Delaware border, these idyllic hills play a big role in the quality of drinking water for thousands of Delawareans. Hidden at the bottom of this valley, this little trickle joins with dozens of others like it on the way to eventually become the White Clay Creek. But as the streams grow in volume, they also pick up nutrients, sediment, and other pollutants along the way. That's a problem for companies like Suez Water, which takes water from the White Clay Creek, treats it, then delivers it to 100,000 Delaware customers. Because of this stream's close proximity to the Hoops dairy farm, an organism called Cryptosporidium has the potential to get in the water.
It's a parasite, lives in the cow's intestinal tract, and when they do what they do, it gets into the water. But if you keep the cows out of the water and they're not producing it in the water stream, then you're not having to take it out when it gets down to the treatment plant.
I'm not the man. There's the.
No, you're the man.
Here they are, all here. All these guys.
Suez has been working with farmers like Hoops and other groups to move livestock away from the water.
There's no farmer that I know of that wants to pollute the water. And there's a finite amount of water, fresh water in the world, and we gotta keep it clean.
To do that, Hoops is working with Red Tail Restoration to plant trees that will help create a 100-foot buffer around the water source.
Sure. Well, this is great because we're involved with a number of different entities that are all facilitating a really healthy ecology, which is really exciting to see. So here we have a farm where the water, as we all know, is running into the stream off of a dairy operation. As it goes in, it has an opportunity to percolate through the trees and get cleaner as it goes into those streams, creating cleaner water downstream in Delaware and into ultimately the Delaware Bay.
It didn't get like this overnight. It's not going to get better overnight.
To see how quickly the work is paying off, Stroud Water Research Center is monitoring the stream.
So that's important so we can begin to understand the total amount of material of other things that are in the water that come out of this valley. And then over time, we can analyze the quality of water, of how it changes in response to the restorations, the things we're changing on the landscape.
For Suez, keeping parasites and other pollutants out of the water is much more efficient and economical than treating it further downstream.
So a number of years ago, we were facing a choice. To meet the regulations, we could either invest up to $20 million in a treatment plant to add treatment, which would have zoomed the cost up for customers, would have increased our carbon footprint, or we could invest upstream, $700,000 over 5 years to do these kinds of projects, and we reach the same goal of reducing pollution.
The Hoops project is just one of more than 24 water quality projects the company has undertaken.
Our resources, we can get a lot done together. No individual entity could shoulder that burden. But by working together and working with the landowners up here who have bought in because these environmental groups have been here for a long time and they trust them, it'll actually pay off in the end with a much less costly and a much more environmentally sustainable approach to reducing pollution getting into the source waters that we use to make drinking water.
About 10 miles north, workers are putting the finishing touches on another project to protect another source of Delaware's drinking water, the Red Clay Creek.
We're at the headwaters of the Upper East Branch of the Red Clay Creek up in East Marlboro Township in Chester County. And we're on a 90-acre farm where the stream pretty much begins. For example, in this farm, it's a horse farm, so we have a number of horses that are grazing each day. It's a good idea to keep them far back from the stream as you can, so one of our projects here is to put fencing in and keep them at least 35 feet away from the stream.
Just like the Hoops farm, trees will be planted along the water's edge at this horse farm. The trees will also help improve water quality downstream.
There's many different myriad benefits to planting trees along streams. We have not just moving operations back and creating a buffer to help process and remove excess nutrients or pollutants that might come in there, but once the trees grow up, they shade the stream, they help buffer the temperature changes, they keep the stream water cooler, which can promote better fish communities or cold water fish communities.
With the buffer, the horses are still given access to the stream, but are limited from standing in the water long term. These projects all start with educating farmers and landowners on the impact their land can have on water quality.
All of the work we do is on private property, so the first step is to get the buy-in from the landowner. Nothing happens unless the landowner decides that this is something they want to do.
We've all got to be good neighbors. I couldn't farm here if I wasn't a good neighbor, and you just can't be a bad neighbor.
It's going to take about 10 years for those trees to provide real protection for the stream. As for the cows, Suez has a formula to calculate the number of cows kept out of the stream over a period of time. Using that formula, they claim they've met EPA standards for reducing that Cryptosporidium parasite.
Mark, the work never ends when it comes to cleaning up our streams and our water supplies. But because change comes so slowly, most of us won't reap the benefits in our lifetime. The only way to ensure the cleanup continues is to focus on the next generation who'll carry on the legacy. Just outside of Westchester is a 3.5 square mile watershed known as Plum Run. The long-studied stream recently received $500,000 worth of improvements. Stormwater runoff, erosion, and sediment in the water were big problems.
Plum Run was in what we would call an impaired condition.
Bob Struble is the Watershed Conservation Director at the Westchester-based Brandywine Red Clay Alliance, or BRC. The Watershed Association has fought to protect and preserve the Brandywine Creek and the Red Clay Creek for the past 72 years.
The sediment is a problem because it covers up the rocks in the stream. The rocks are the places where the insects, what we call macroinvertebrates, the insects will nest. The insects are important because the fish eat the insects, and if you don't have good insects, you won't have the fish you're looking for. The nitrogen and phosphorus are fertilizer elements. People put them on their lawn, and in the stream they have the same effect. They can start to grow things like algae or other aquatic life in the stream that will take oxygen out of the stream and lower the oxygen levels. That can be harmful to fish and other aquatic life. So all those three are important to keep at a minimum as much as possible.
This work matters to Delaware because the waterways may start in Pennsylvania, but they flow into the first state and provide much of our drinking water.
If we get things right with those small streams, that will literally flow downstream to the larger ones. So it's incredibly important to work on those small streams and make sure they're in good condition.
The 5-year restoration project at Plum Run was completed in 2013. Vertical stream banks were sloped to prevent erosion. Native grasses and wildflowers were planted to stand up to storms. A cross vein, which looks like a dam, was put in to channel the water, and over 1,000 trees and shrubs were planted.
One of the things we struggle with is getting the general public to understand that we still have a way to go with improving our water, and I don't think anybody objects to that, but it may not be up near the top of the list anymore, and that's a bit of a struggle for us.
It's a fight the next generation of water stewards will have to carry on.
Determine who you want to work with.
Jerry Kaufman heads up the University of Delaware's Water Resources Center. He's teaching that next generation of hydrologists, conservation scientists, and green engineers in his watershed management class.
We look at the engineering of our water resources, we look at the laws, the economics, the society, governance structures on how water is managed in Delaware and the Mid-Atlantic and in the nation.
The U.S. Department of Labor tracks some of these green jobs, and the numbers show it's a real growth industry in terms of employment. In 2000, the job numbers in this category was a little over 1 million, with a median income of $43,000. 16 years later, employment rose 11% to 1.2 million. The median salary grew to $63,000.
We keep track of the graduates and they get really good jobs, whether it's in the public or private sector. Some of them are actually deciding, water policy, here in Delaware and also in the EPA, for instance.
Kaufman says the class has been offered to undergrads and postgrads since 1999 and has steadily seen an increase in enrollment.
Protecting the environment to our current generation that's gone to university and high school, they see it as a natural thing to do. So I'm encouraged by that. So therefore, the rise of environmentalism is peaking now.
While Kaufman teaches the next generation, Brandywine Red Clay Alliance education coordinator Julia Steiner is focused on the generation after that.
All right, guys, get in your groups, please.
She's grooming the future decision makers through BRC's K-12 summer camps and water programs.
We look at the physical aspects of the pond ecosystem. So students will come to the site and they'll notice what's growing here, what the absence or presence of a variety of species of trees. What's around the pond? Does it have a good buffer? Is everything mowed back? Does it have shade? These are all important characteristics to a healthy pond. Then they'll literally get more into the pond. They'll sample the water, they'll look at the pH of the water. They'll have the opportunity to look at the dissolved oxygen because they learn that what's living in the pond can't necessarily get their oxygen from the air. They need to get it from what's in the water.
Just now.
What are you going to do with it?
We're going to release them in the water. Okay, come on.
And then they end the program by dip netting and exploring, we call them water bugs or macroinvertebrates. And their absence or presence in the water really does give kids a look at holistically the health of the pond.
Fun, hands-on activities Steiner hopes will plant a seed.
So if they learn something, they learn that something does not benefit water quality or just the environment in general, we hope that they carry that with them as they grow up.
Carrying on the heritage of clean water.
We checked the water temperatures and they were really good, and it turned out that it was in perfect condition.
And protecting natural resources in Delaware, Chester County, and beyond for generations to come.
Hello. Good morning.
The majority of Delaware's waterways are still impaired, but BRC tells us that the dissolved oxygen and nitrogen phosphorus levels are improving.
Coming up, a little history lesson on how Delaware's coastline got the way it is. And let's have some fun rowing around the Christina River with the Newport Rowing Club.
The Delaware watershed covers Newcastle County all the way down to Lewis, where the Delaware River opens to the Delaware Bay.
Our friends at 302 Stories have profiled this area. It starts with the earliest European settlers. The Dukes family arrived back in the early 1600s when they settled at the mouth of Blackbird Creek, part of the Upper Bayshore region.
Blackbird has been part of her life as long as I can remember, and my ancestors before me. They had been involved with the Hudson Bay Fur Company. So when they came down and saw the Delaware marshes with all the muskrat houses, that was really a drawing card.
Through 10 generations, the Dukes have cultivated and cherished their special relationship with their piece of the Bayshore. Along with many of their neighbors, they participate in Delaware's Farmland Preservation Program, which enables landowners to retain their property and maintain their traditional way of life.
The Dutch went to diking and reclaiming the land, using the wetlands in an agricultural fashion. The wetlands were fertile, and they probably were more comfortable with reclaiming the wetlands than doing a lot of cutting into the forests.
These diked areas, or impoundments, often located directly adjacent to tidal waters, were created years ago for agriculture, flood, and mosquito control, along with waterfowl hunting. Today, these wetland habitats are fully integrated into this diverse landscape, hosting well-established plant and animal communities.
While still used seasonally by hunters and trappers, many of these state-owned areas have been enhanced with the support necessary to give the public exceptional accessibility to wildlife year-round. Only a short distance inland, the landscape changes dramatically. Open marsh and farmland give way to forested uplands that are home to a completely different mix of plant and animal species. They also contain ancient low-lying depressions that fill with water only during winter and early spring, forming unique temporary wetlands known as ephemeral or Delmarva pools.
There's many different types of Delmarva pools in the Delaware Bay Shore. We have large ones like this, and we have very small ones down to the size of puddles. All these are very valuable to wildlife, especially amphibians.
Spotted salamanders, barking tree frogs, and other unusual creatures spend their entire lives quietly around these hidden seasonal freshwater pools.
But there are also many other diverse natural areas found along Delaware's bayshore. The central region contains one of the largest forested uplands in the state, the Milford Neck Conservation Area. You can walk amidst tall pines, completely unaware that they are only a short distance from the salt marshes in Delaware Bay. The forests and wetlands support diverse wildlife, including wild turkeys, woodpeckers, and otters. At the bay's sandy beaches, another one-of-a-kind natural event occurs each spring, an epic drama that plays out as two of the world's largest animal migrations come together in a spectacular gathering.
Millions of horseshoe crabs, drawn by warming waters and circadian rhythms, swarm bayshore beaches to spawn and lay their eggs. On cue, thousands of migrating shorebirds on their annual journey north to the Arctic arrive to gorge themselves on the rich banquet. This annual event draws crowds of visitors as well, who come to witness and celebrate this unique and miraculous annual phenomenon.
Finally, to the south, as Delaware Bay widens, the bayshore landscape changes again. Long sandy beaches, occasionally dotted with small, quiet communities, border vast inland salt marshes. These barrier beaches serve people, plants, and animals, while also protecting the adjoining wetlands from the bay's dramatic weather. Those marshes support everything from diamondback terrapins to northern harriers and wading birds. You may also see the rare Delmarva fox squirrel every once in a while. Our thanks to 302 Stories for the visual tour. Now we head over to Shirley with a special guest.
Thanks, Mark. The Brandywine Christina Watershed spans 3 states and supplies the drinking water to over 500,000 people in Delaware and Pennsylvania. A newly released report highlights projects being carried out throughout the watershed to improve its overall health. And joining me now to talk about the report's findings is Martha Narvaez, a policy scientist at the Water Resources Center at the University of Delaware.
Yes, yes.
Hi, Martha. Thanks so much for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Legacy pollutants, nutrients, stormwater runoff, septic systems that are kind of going south, all of these have sort of contributed to the impairment of our waterways.
Yes.
And that's sort of how we got here today. Can you tell me, based on the report, what types of projects are underway to sort of mitigate some of these threats?
There are a lot of open space preservation programs going on. Up in Pennsylvania specifically, there's 17 municipalities that have dedicated open space preservation programs. We also are looking at septics and trying to figure out how to prevent leaking septics. We're also looking at stream bank fencing to try and keep livestock out of the streams and keep the pollution out of the streams. And then we're also looking to educate the public to try and prevent stormwater pollution from everyday practices.
Are you finding that now that we know better and know what is beneficial for the water, that people are more easily coming on board, or is it still kind of a lesson that's being learned?
I think the more we talk to people, the more they understand there's problems. The problem is that people don't know what they can do. So they don't understand that maybe some of their everyday practices are impacting our water supply and our recreational waters.
What is one thing that would help tremendously? Like if someone doesn't know what they're doing wrong, what is something that they could do that could sort of at least get the needle moving in the right direction?
I think that people understanding that everything that they do on the land ultimately ends up in the water. So if you're throwing things on the ground, if you're putting things on your lawn, anything you're doing in the land ultimately ends up in the water because it's running down when it rains and it's going into our streams and rivers.
The report and the findings in the report, are we showing progress in any form, in a positive direction?
Yes. I think the report does a great job of showing where we're making progress and where we're not. Some of the areas where we're making progress are we're seeing increasing levels of dissolved oxygen. So we need oxygen in our streams for things to survive and for it to be a healthy system. We're also seeing improvements in buffers along the streams so that the streams are more protected and, like I said, in open space. And then we're also seeing improvements in phosphorus levels. So the phosphorus levels are declining and are making the streams healthier.
And that's in direct relation to some of the projects?
Yes, that's in direct relation to some of the practices that a lot of the groups are putting on the ground. Some of the conservation practices on the farms, some of the education campaigns with homeowners and the public.
The report and the efforts being carried out to improve our water supply, they were all funded through a William Penn Foundation grant, correct?
Yes.
And I know UD is a major player here. Who are your other partners and who are you collaborating with?
Yeah, so the William Penn Foundation has made significant contributions. They just recently pledged $42 million for the next 3 years, which brings the total to about $100 million that they'll be investing in the Delaware River watershed. So that's the entire Delaware River watershed. There's also a lot of other groups working hard, like the Brandywine Conservancy, the Brandywine Red Clay Alliance, Delaware Nature Society, Stroud Water Research Center, and then a lot of government entities who have been working for decades on this are continuing to work on it, like Chester County Water Resources Authority, Newcastle County, City of Newark, City of Wilmington, and DNREC.
So it's critical too to invest not just for the overall health, but I mean, it's an economic driver, right?
Absolutely. The Brandywine Christina provides over 100,000 jobs, both directly and indirectly.
And finally, I want to talk about this water fund you've been sort of toying about, where people downstream would invest in upstream conservation efforts.
Yes.
Where does that stand?
So we are still looking at implementing the water fund. Both the Nature Conservancy of Delaware and the University of Delaware Water Resources Center are partnering on this initiative. We actually have a pilot project that the City of Newark has invested in, a project upstream in Pennsylvania to try and work out some of the technical details and try and understand how it works in terms of regulations and state regulations and meeting those regulations. So we are piloting a project right now.
Okay, Martha Narvaez with the University of Delaware, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, Mark is going to take us rowing.
Water is vital for life, and keeping our water clean is important not just for drinking, but also for recreation. Let's head out on the Christina River with the Newport Rowing Club, and you'll see how these students see water in a different light.
Same lineups as yesterday.
Every day after school, members of the Newport Rowing Club gather at their boathouse along the Christina River south of Wilmington. Before hitting the water, the team of about 40 high schoolers gets a brief warm-up and some inspiration from coach and club founder John Cohn.
They asked her, like, what's your message? What's the secret? And she said, keep showing up. That was it. Like, just keep showing up, do your work, it'll happen, but you have to just be there for it.
After a short jog to the river, team members grab their boats and oars and hit the water.
Our high school group is definitely our biggest group. We have about 40 athletes now, and they race all throughout the year, about 10 races per year. Our middle school group is a ton of fun. It's a really good introduction to the sport. They practice here 3 times a week.
And we'll do three pieces around this length.
Rowing is often used as a metaphor for all sorts of things in life. It teaches a ton of hard work, it teaches teamwork, it teaches resilience.
That resilience was on display on the day we followed along with the team. It was an unusually chilly April afternoon with temps hovering around 40 degrees on land and even cooler over the water. But the rowers took it in stride.
It's an extremely physically demanding sport. It's also one of the sports that people can do for their entire lives, from the time they can hold an oar until they're unable to later in life.
There's no sport that requires such a team bond like this one. You are in a boat with other girls. You have to be exactly with them, catch with them, everything with them, and inside the boat and outside of the boat, you're a team and you're a family, and that's the best part.
After joining the team as a sophomore just to get into shape, senior Anna Goodwin will continue her rowing career in college.
I'm going to be joining the Temple women's rowing team next year.
For our athletes, one of the other benefits is that it can help them get into college. So particularly women are heavily recruited in college, and we've been really fortunate to help about 50 athletes in the last 7 years go row at schools all over the country, from Division III and club teams all the way up to Division I. We've had an NCAA champion come out of our club. We've had national team members.
Ready? Go.
Rowing on the Christina gives a whole different perspective to this river nestled alongside the city of Wilmington and crisscrossing underneath the congestion of I-95.
You don't think that you'll find this natural system in the middle of Wilmington, Delaware, but you see this amazing little home that we have, and it's so important to keep it clean.
Courtney, high into the body.
Obviously, it's a really important thing to us. We monitor the water all the time to know what the conditions are going to be like and what we should expect from each practice. We also get to see a whole different side of the city and the river. For example, there are bald eagles that have nests all over the river, and we point them out every time we see them. It's a really cool thing, so we love that.
We rely on it 100%. It's our sport. We need water to do it. We also see the nature every single day. We see like the ecosystem, and if they don't have that clean water, then there's no place for us to row.
Coach Cohn hopes to grow the club to 80 or 90 rowers. His goal is to have as many people rowing in northern Delaware as possible. In addition to the after-school programs, the club also hosts summer camps for middle and high schoolers to get out on the water and give rowing a chance.
Newport on 3. 1, 2, 3. Newport!
A couple of notes before we wrap up the program. One item we couldn't get into our Follow the Stream story was a collaboration between Suez Water and the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. They're looking to restore the mussel population in Bellevue Lake. Looks like an interesting project.
And very beneficial. Also, Mike Oates of 302 Stories talked to Jack Dukes, a 9th generation farmer, for our Bayshore story. Jack has since passed, but we appreciate that his family connection will continue.
Thanks so much for watching this WHYY special, Preserving Our Water, How We Use the Delaware Watershed. For Mark Eichman, I'm Shirley Min. Have a great week.